I used to think my cat didn't like me. Not even a little. Every morning, I'd wake up thinking, today's the day. Maybe today she'd finally warm up to me. I'd smile, call her name, reach out my hand. She'd look straight at me for exactly 1 second, then walk away like our conversation had never happened. Dogs run toward you. Cats apparently schedule appointments. At first, I honestly thought I was doing something wrong. Maybe she didn't trust me. Maybe she didn't like my voice. Maybe she just had terrible taste in humans. Then, one evening, I caught her watching me. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. The second I looked back, she didn't run. She stayed. Then something happened I'd never noticed before. She slowly closed her eyes. It looked almost like she was falling asleep right in front of me. I had absolutely no idea what that meant. So, naturally, I assumed she was judging me. Out of pure curiosity, I tried doing the exact same thing. I slowly closed my eyes and waited. Nothing happened. Then she did it again. Another slow blink. This time, I couldn't ignore it. That tiny moment made me wonder, what if I'd been reading her wrong this whole time? So, I made a decision. Instead of trying to make my cat love me, I was going to learn how she says it. And that's when everything changed.
That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those slow blinks. It was such a tiny moment. Just a cat slowly closing her eyes. But somehow, it felt important. Like she was trying to tell me something in a language I had never learned. The more I thought about it, the stranger everything became. If she really didn't like me, then why was she always in the same room? Not beside me. Not asking for attention. Just never very far away. The next morning, I decided not to call her. No treats. No toys. No. I wanted to see what she would do if I completely ignored her. So I grabbed a book, sat quietly on the couch, and acted like she didn't even exist. Honestly, that was much harder than I expected. For almost a full minute, nothing happened. She stayed across the room, looking out the window, pretending I wasn't there.
I started thinking, well, I guess that answers my question.
Then, without making a sound, she jumped down. No dramatic entrance. No meow. Just one quiet step after another. I kept reading my book. Or at least, I pretended to. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see her getting closer. Very, very slowly. She didn't climb onto my lap. She didn't ask to be petted. She didn't even look at me. She simply walked past and settled down a few feet away. That was confusing. If she wanted attention, why stop there? And if she wanted to be alone, why come over at all?
Cats never seem interested in making things easy for us.
A few minutes later, I stood up. Mostly because I needed more coffee. But secretly, I was running a little experiment. Would she stay there? Or would she leave? I walked into the kitchen, filled my mug, opened the refrigerator, waited. Nothing. At least, that's what I thought. When I turned around, she was sitting in the kitchen doorway, completely silent, watching me again. Not begging, not impatient. Just there. That couldn't be a coincidence. So I walked back to the living room. She followed. I stopped. She stopped. I walked again. A few seconds later, she did, too. Now I was curious. Really curious. So instead of guessing, I decided to test it. One room after another. Back and forth. Around the entire apartment. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Bedroom. Bathroom. I probably looked ridiculous. But she kept following me like this was the most normal thing in the world. She wasn't glued to my feet. Sometimes she'd stop. Stretch. Look out a window. Sniff a chair. Then quietly catch up again. Always without me calling her. That's when something finally clicked. Maybe she wasn't following me because she needed something. Maybe she simply wanted to know where I was. I opened the front door just a few inches. Not enough to leave. Just enough to pretend I might. Her ears stood up immediately. She looked at me. Then at the door. Then back at me. The moment I closed the door, she relaxed again. Walked over. Sat down nearby. As if to say, "Good. You're staying." That was the moment. I realized something. Maybe love doesn't always sound like excitement.
Sometimes it looks like a quiet little shadow that simply refuses to let you disappear.
The following weekend, I noticed something that had somehow escaped me for months. Every single time she decided to take a nap, she always chose a place that happened to be close to me. Not on me. Just close enough. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe that corner of the couch was warmer. Maybe the sunlight landed there first. Maybe I was giving myself way too much credit. So, I started paying attention. Not for an hour. Not for a day. For an entire week. And the pattern never changed. If I worked at my desk, she somehow ended up sleeping under the chair. If I watched TV, she appeared beside the couch. If I folded laundry, she curled up on the nearby rug. Always nearby. Never demanding. Always present. That sounded sweet. Until I remembered something.
I had bought her a ridiculously expensive cat bed. The kind that every advertisement promised would become a cat's favorite place.
It was unbelievably soft. Perfectly round. Covered in plush fabric. Honestly, I kind of wanted to sleep in it myself. She looked at it exactly once. Walked over. Sniffed every corner. Stepped inside. Turned in a slow circle. And I thought, this is it. For about 3 glorious seconds, I felt like the greatest cat owner alive. I was already imagining telling my friends how much she loved it. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she climbed back out. Walked straight past the luxurious bed. Past the sunny window. Past the fluffy rug. And curled up right beside my old couch. The same couch she'd been sleeping next to all along.
I just stared at her, completely defeated.
That's when it finally hit me. Maybe she wasn't choosing the couch. Maybe she was choosing who happened to be sitting on it. That idea sounded ridiculous. Surely cats weren't that sentimental, right? So, once again, I decided to test it. The next afternoon, I moved to the dining table, somewhere I almost never sat. It wasn't especially comfortable. It wasn't warm. There was absolutely no reason for a cat to sleep there. She watched me from across the apartment. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, she stood up, stretched, and slowly wandered over. She ignored the sunny windowsill, ignored her expensive bed, ignored the couch she usually liked. Instead, she curled up under my chair. I couldn't help laughing. Not because it was funny, because I was running out of explanations. Every experiment kept giving me the exact same answer. She wasn't following comfort. She wasn't following food. She wasn't following habit. She was following me. That was strangely moving, because she never asked for anything in return. No constant petting. No treats. No attention. Just the comfort of knowing I was nearby. And maybe, if I'm being honest, I had started doing the exact same thing. The apartment somehow felt quieter whenever she wasn't around. I was beginning to look for her, too. That's when I stopped asking, "How do I make my cat love me?" Instead, I found myself asking a very different question. How long had she been trying to show me without me ever noticing? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything I'd seen. The slow blinks, the quiet following, the way she always chose to sleep nearby. Individually, they didn't seem like much, but together, they felt impossible to ignore. So I did what every confused pet owner eventually does. I opened my laptop, typed one simple question, and disappeared into the internet for the next 3 hours. I expected to find a dozen completely different opinions. Instead, I kept seeing the exact same idea over and over again. Cats don't show affection the way dogs do. They don't need applause. They don't need constant attention. They speak a much quieter language. Every slow blink, every tiny head bump, every moment they choose to stay close isn't random. It's communication. To us, it feels ordinary. To another cat, those tiny actions mean something much bigger. I trust you. I feel safe. I don't need to be on guard. That word, safe. It kept appearing in every article I read. Not love. Not loyalty. Safety. And suddenly, everything made sense. She wasn't following me because she depended on me. She was following me because she felt relaxed when she knew where I was. Think about it. Cats spend thousands of years surviving by noticing every little change around them. Knowing where the people they trust are means fewer surprises. That doesn't sound romantic. It sounds practical. But sometimes, the purest form of love is simply feeling safe enough to close your eyes. The next morning, I stopped trying to earn her affection. No calling her name. No convincing. No chasing. I just went about my day. Something interesting happened. Without me trying, she still found me. Kitchen. Living room. Bedroom. Office. Different places. Same little shadow. For the first time, I wasn't asking, "How can I get closer?" I was simply noticing how often she chose to get closer to me. The funny thing is, nothing about her changed. She still wasn't clingy. She still disappeared for hours, sometimes.
She still acted like the apartment belonged to her. Which, to be fair, it probably did.
But I had changed. Instead of looking for dramatic displays of affection, I started noticing the tiny ones. The ones I'd ignored for months. Like the way she always chose the chair closest to mine, even when 5 other chairs were completely empty. or how she'd leave the room only to quietly return a few minutes later. Not because she needed anything, just to check that I was still there. The more I watched, the more I realized I had been measuring love using the wrong species. I wanted dog answers from a cat. Cats don't always shout their feelings. Sometimes they whisper them, so softly that you only hear them once you finally stop talking. And just when I thought I'd figured everything out, she did something I'd never seen before. She walked straight toward me, looked into my eyes, and gently pressed her forehead against mine.
For just 1 second, it changed everything.
I froze. Not because it hurt. It barely touched me. Just a tiny, gentle bump, like she was making sure I was really there. Then she stepped back, looked at me for a second, and calmly walked away, as if nothing unusual had happened. Meanwhile, my brain was trying to figure out what had just happened. Naturally, I assumed she wanted food. So, I grabbed the treat bag. She looked at it, looked back at me, and walked in the opposite direction. Apparently, that wasn't it. Later that evening, she did it again. One gentle head bump. Then another. No meowing. No asking. No reward. Just that tiny little gesture. At this point, I had learned my lesson. Instead of guessing, I went back to researching. Because every time I assumed I knew what she meant, I was wrong. This time, the answer surprised me even more than the slow blink. Cats have scent glands around their cheeks, their forehead, and the sides of their face. When they gently rub against you or bump their forehead into you, they're leaving a tiny, invisible scent. Not one humans can smell, but one other cats absolutely can. It's almost like saying, this person belongs with me. Not as property, as family, as part of their safe little world. That suddenly explained something else. Why she'd rub against my legs every time I came home. I used to think she was just stretching. Now, it felt different. It wasn't a random habit. It was her way of saying hello in a language I'd finally started learning. Once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. The slow blink. The quiet following. Sleeping nearby. The tiny head bump. Every little piece started fitting together. The funny thing is, she had probably been saying I trust you for months. Maybe even years. I was simply waiting for a louder version that was never coming. That's when I realized something a little embarrassing. I had spent all that time trying to teach my cat how humans show affection instead of learning how cats do. I wanted hugs. She offered slow blinks. I wanted excitement. She offered quiet company. I wanted obvious affection. She offered trust. Neither of us was wrong. We were simply speaking completely different languages. And somehow, we were both waiting for the other to become fluent first. After that, I stopped chasing her. I stopped calling her every 5 minutes. I stopped wondering whether she loved me enough. Instead, I just shared the room with her. Strangely, that was exactly when she became more affectionate than ever. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Little by little. Day after day. She still disappeared sometimes. She still liked her personal space. She was still very much a cat. But every evening, without fail, she came back. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. And somehow, that meant far more than anything I could have forced. That's when I finally understood. My cat had never been bad at showing love. I had simply been looking for the wrong signs. And there was still one last thing she wanted to teach me. The next morning, nothing looked different. The apartment was exactly the same. The couch was still there. The window still filled the room with warm sunlight. Even she looked exactly the same. The only thing that had changed was me. For the first time, I wasn't trying to get her attention. I simply made my coffee, sat down on the couch, opened my book, and let the morning happen. She stayed on the windowsill, watching birds, watching leaves dance in the wind, watching a world that seemed endlessly interesting. And I smiled, because I finally understood she didn't need to entertain me. She just needed to be herself. A few minutes later, I felt the couch move. Not much. Just enough to make me look up. Without a sound, she had jumped beside me again. She didn't ask to be petted. She didn't curl into my lap. She simply chose the empty space beside me. Close enough to hear me breathe. Close enough to know she wasn't alone. Months ago, I probably would have reached over immediately, trying to pet her, trying to prove that we were becoming friends. This time, I didn't move at all. And something wonderful happened. After a few quiet seconds, she closed the distance herself. Just a little. Until our shoulders were almost touching. I never realized how much trust can exist inside such a tiny movement. No words. No dramatic music. Just a cat deciding you are a safe place to rest. That moment lasted less than a minute. But somehow, I remember it better than almost anything else. Because it wasn't something I earned. It was something she freely gave. Looking back now, I laugh at myself. I spent so much time asking, why doesn't my cat love me? When the better question was, why can't I see the way she's already showing it? Cats rarely make grand speeches. They don't throw parties when you come home. They don't always run when you call their name. And maybe that's exactly why their affection feels so special. Because every slow blink, every quiet follow, every nap beside you, every tiny head bump is a choice. Not an obligation. A choice. A choice made by an animal that could spend its entire day anywhere in the house. Yet somehow keeps choosing to spend part of it with you. That realization changed the way I looked at her forever. I stopped searching for louder signs. Because the quiet ones were there all along. Now, every time she slowly blinks, I smile and blink back. Not because I expect anything to happen, but because I finally understand what she's saying. Every time she sleeps nearby, I no longer wonder whether it's an accident. I simply feel grateful that out of every place she could be, she chose this one. And every time she gently bumps her little forehead against my hand, I remember that invisible message she leaves behind. You belong in my world. Maybe your cat has been saying those same words to you. Not with sounds, not with tricks, not with obedience, but in the only language cats have ever known. So the next time your cat quietly sits beside you, or slowly closes their eyes, or follows you from one room to another, don't ask, what does my cat want? Instead, ask yourself, what is my cat trying to tell me? Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't ask to be noticed. Sometimes love is simply a quiet little shadow, choosing again and again to stay close. And maybe that's been the answer all along.